I the host? So okay, now.
This isn't how I logged in. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, have another piece of chocolate as your reward. Please have another piece of chocolate as your reward. This isn't how I logged in last time. Remember, I couldn't log in using my Gmail account. I use my own Gmail account to log in, and I can host and it's recording. And this isn't what happened last time. So this is different from last time I logged in. So, all right. So, thank you. Without the students' help, it would be a pretty desperate situation here. So make sure that I don't close that. Go here again. Open up www.cuk. This, yeah, Cyber Campus, and see if we can do this again. English, Cyber Campus, log in. Go to pen, go to space. I'm supposed to tell you. All right, do that again. Okay, one more time. Go here. Go here. No, that's not here. This is my attendance. So here we are in week 3, go here, smart attendance, and your number is 242. So 242 is your smart attendance number. Okay, 242. So you've already signed in. Good. Thank you very much. So that's working. And we go then to back to the notes, and we go to methodology and chapter 5 and 6, and we open that up again and make that big and make sure that I'm sharing the screen. So go to share screen and we go here. All right. And then the group and the individual. This is one of the 5 critical characteristics in terms of interpersonal relations that Trompenaars and Hampton-Turner emphasize. And this relates to how people focus on the relationship of the individual to the group. And again, Trompenaars and Hampton-Turner are doing something very interesting here, and I interpret it further from my own background. So I think one of the critical points I want to emphasize here is that what they're really talking about are values. Values are, as they express them, are the feeling and expression. Let me close that door there so I don't bother people outside. So the point that they make this point also in the book, we all value individual status and respect. You want to be looking out for your own interests. You want to look out for your own interests in your culture. I come from the United States. America is the land of the individual. We claim to be intense individualists. And does that mean that we Americans are not community oriented and group oriented in terms of our relationship to the group? No, of course not. We are very much group oriented. But I think when Trompenaars talks about values, what he's really referring to are romantic self-images, romantic stereotypes that individuals and groups have of themselves. And so he claims that cultural values are different in Asia compared to, say, United States and Northern Europe, although they do make the point that Southern Europeans, Italians, for example, like my father's family background, tend to be more group oriented. So, and of course, he asked the question in terms of, again, not trying to understand Korean or Cambodian or Chinese culture, but trying to understand differences between Confucian culture, for example, and North European romantic images that we have in Northern Europe and the United States as a country founded by Northern Europeans. And so he asked these two questions. Do we discover first in terms of understanding cultural differences? The emphasis here is upon cultural differences. Do we discover first what each of us individually wants in terms of relating the person to the group? Or do we start with some shared concept of the public and collective good? Does that have precedence? And I think he would say, I got to be careful talking about Korea, because as I mentioned, Korea, according to some other writers, is more like Hong Kong and Taiwan and Singapore. It's been so strongly influenced by Northern European culture because of the British and the American impact on these societies. But I think he would say that Confucian cultures, and that includes Korea and Japanese and Chinese cultures, that this is very important. And obviously it's a very important everywhere. I mean, Americans don't like other Americans who are seen as traitors, treasonous traitors to the United States. So obviously Americans are also very much concerned about the collective good. It's the point that he's trying to make here, however, is that when you talk about the relationship or consider the relationship of the individual to the group, do you start with the individual in your first thought, or do you start with the group as your first thought? And he's claiming that in Confucian cultures, there's more of a stronger tendency to think first about the group and then the individual's relationship to it. I mean, we all know how competitive South Korean culture is. So clearly, individuals are highly competitive with each other here in South Korea. So there are strong individualistic elements in South Korea as well. But at the same time, what strikes me in my own personal impressions of my time here in Korea is how strongly, for example, there is a concern about making sure that your company or your university, like even Catholic University of Korea, that it looks respectable, that it maintains an honorable, high profile reputation. And that's true in US as well. I understand that, but it seems to me it's even stronger here in Korea. And that might be reflected, for example, in how competitive organizations are with each other. I mean, Korean, maybe even more so than the US, although it's still true also in the US, ranking universities. Like if you look at the Catholic University of Korea website, they say ranked 13th in Korean universities, number 3 in medical school. This notion of the organization, the organizational group, the Catholic University of Korea, competing with other groups is very, very strong. And maybe even stronger than it is among American universities. But again, these are all different endpoints of one single continuum, is the point that they're trying to make. And so Parsons and Shills, Talcott Parsons is one of the most important founders of sociology in America. Talcott Parsons was, I think, a biologist. He translated Max Weber's work, the great German sociologist who wrote this Protestant Ethic in the Spirit of Capitalism. Some of you may have heard of that book. I think Koreans heard much of that book. Talcott Parsons was one of the first translators of Max Weber's German writings into English. And Parsons and Shills, they defined individualism as a prime orientation to the self. Orientation means outlook, perspective, attitude. How do you respond to a stimulus? Do you think, what's in it for me? Or do you think about, well, what's in it for my family? What's in it for my group, my various groups I belong to? Communitarianism is a prime orientation to common goals and objectives. And one or the other of these two have primacy in different cultures in their respective thinking processes. Of course, both, of course, may have a place in the reasoning. Of course they do. Of course they do. it doesn't matter what I'm saying. Confucian culture, Anglo-Saxon culture in Europe, they both think about the group and the individual. But the question is, where does the beginning consideration emphasize the well-being of the individual or the well-being of your membership in a group? Your approach to your understanding about your obligation, for example, to your family. And so again, we have one of our first little exercises that we can do here. 140,000 managers were surveyed. I mean, they surveyed 140,000 managers. That's a lot of managers. These are mid-level people who are working at the middle level of their company, who are taking a seminar with Franz Troppenars in one of his probably very expensive seminars. And while they're in the seminar, he surveys them. He says, 2 people were discussing ways in which individuals could improve the quality of life. So think about that quality of life. One said, A, it is obvious that if individuals have as much freedom as possible, the maximum opportunity to develop themselves as individuals, the quality of life of their life will improve as a result, right? That, give an individual as much freedom as possible and the maximum opportunity to pursue their own individualistic journey and achievement efforts, and they will be the most happy. Or the other individual said, if individuals are continuously taking care of their fellow human beings, the quality of life will improve for everyone, even if it obstructs individual freedom and individual development. So, fellow human beings include your family, it includes Korea, it includes your country like Korea, it includes your organization. That if you take your family, include your spouse and your children. So which of these 2 ways of reasoning do you think is usually best, A or B? That's what they did in this exercise for 140,000 managers. And so, since you're here, we will now do, if I can find it here. Okay, today is the 16th. Okay, so would you please make sure I'm sharing the screen? Tell me what you think. And I think you're voting anonymously. You're voting anonymously, so I don't know how you vote. Nobody will know how you vote. So what do you choose? Do you choose A or B? Which of the 2 ways of reasoning do you think is usually best, typically best, A or B? So everybody on your computers, please vote. Do you have your computer? Oh, do you have a computer? Oh, okay, if you can use that. So please vote. Okay. And I guess we can take, 1 minute to do this, maximum 1 minute. And has everybody voted? So A or B? And 4 people, but what about the other 2 people in the room? So in the class, please, everybody vote. Okay, and so most have gone with B. I can tell you, again, just speaking as an American, reading that first selection here, that seemed to me to be obvious, right? That was what your typical American would say. It's something that we're socialized to believe, right? The individual, the individual, the individual. It's emphasized in popular culture, it's emphasized in education, it's emphasized in the ocean that I swim in as an American born in the American Ocean. And you were born in the Korean Ocean, and you were born in the Cambodian Ocean. You're all born in a different cultural ocean. And as an American fish in the American Ocean, A just seemed obvious. That's why everybody thinks, right? So I think that's do that one more selection there. Okay, so then we go back to the notes, and so what did they find here? So the people that chose A are below here, right? So Norwegians, you can't get more Northern European than that, right? 95% chose, among Norwegians chose A, Norwegian managers. Among those 140,000 managers, you have managers from Norway, Russia, United States, Finland. And then at the bottom here, you have India. Where is South Korea? Yeah, South Korea is in the middle. So 42. Again, he wants to compare people from different cultures. Again, just triggering their socialization as to their values that they have learned all the time that they were growing up. And they're taking Trompenaar's seminar because they're in international business and they need to be more trained and aware, according to their companies, paying them to take these seminars with Trompenaar, with the seminar with Trompenaars and Hampton Turner, because they have to function in a multicultural environment. So they should be aware, these Indians and Malaysians and Japanese, that if you're managing Americans, or particularly Norwegians, you have to be careful how you talk to them about and regarding your assumptions as a manager about what you need to do to motivate those Americans or Norwegians, right? If you say, well, you have to do it because everybody else is doing it, an American will go, what? That's not a good enough explanation for me because everybody else is doing it. Are you crazy? And I think we have one Cambodian student in the class. I have to say, unfortunately, I don't think Trompenaars has much yet experience working with Cambodian managers. So I don't think I ever see Cambodia appearing here, but you can see some of these others. And again, you get this strange result. Look at Russia. Russians are even more individualistic than the United States. And again, there's just one reference in the book, vague reference in this 4th edition of the textbook, where Trompenaars thinks that this is a reaction of these Russian managers. Remember, these are the Russian middle class people. These are people that are successful in Russia. These are people that are successful in post-communist Russia. They're making money. They're living what they believe to be Western lifestyles. They probably go eat at KFC and McDonald's. They have money to spend. They want to live like America, and they are reacting against socialism. You're not seeing Russian peasants, Russian farm workers are not in Trompenaar's seminar. They're not in Trompenaar's class. They're not being surveyed. Who's being surveyed? Professionals, people that are highly educated. Trompenaars is probably lecturing in English to these people, right? He's not lecturing in Italian and Thai and Portuguese. So these Russian managers, they know English really well, like you do. And that's typically his response. You find these former communist countries with these managers coming from old communist countries, they're being incredibly individualistic because they were saying, adios, no to communitarianism, because under Stalinism, they were told, you must do what your obligation to society is. You work because it's your social obligation. You're not being ambitious. You're not striving to make maximum amount of money for yourself. No, no, no. And they're explicitly rejecting that. He is his explanation, particularly in the previous edition of this book. So that's kind of interesting. And lowest, of course, are the French in terms of their ranking on this chart. These French managers, these French mid-career managers, pretty low, along with these others. And he's, of course, French. His mother is French, and he makes that point, tries to explain this on an individual level. I mean, and that's an important part of, in terms of doing research for this class. You're going to do some research. That the most interesting part of your research in methodology of international studies, in social science, the more interesting part is your interpretation of the data. You're going to get these results, this data that you will gather in your research. And then you have to explain how you interpret. You have to interpret the significance of the data that you gather. And that's what really attracts the attention and interest of your readers. So here you see he's trying to explain what's going on here. I mean, France is pretty close to Britain. France is pretty close to Germany. It's right next door to Germany. How can the French be so communitarian oriented? And he says, well, you know, the French, they all take vacations in August on the same date. It's like that in Italy too. You know, on August 15th, you know, I used to go to Italy to visit my family in Rome. And it was strange. I would go jogging in the morning along the road, the busy roads in the morning. And on August 15th, they're almost all empty. Not completely, but all the cars are gone. Because why? Everybody goes on their August vacation in Italy and particularly in France. And in the community is France and the family. But in other social encounters, the French are intensely individualistic. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, this is my, you know, whenever you see these kinds of notes, you see my initials here, BD. This is my interpretation. Emmanuel Macron, president of France, is trying to change French labor law to make it more individualistic, to allow companies to have their own individual retirement plans for their workers. And there's been tremendous political resistance in France before the pandemic, and before the pandemic overwhelmed everybody's agenda. But Emmanuel Macron is trying to make French labor market more flexible, which means breaking down this strong community focus that we are French workers, and French workers are going to be united and in solidarity. And we are strongly focused on making sure that the French unions and French workers stay united in their opposition to flexibility, a more individualistic Anglo-Saxon, British American approach to managing labor in their countries. He says, even in English-speaking countries, many of the French words that express subtle relationships in a group setting are popular. Like, in other words, the French have a stronger communitarian focus, and that's reflected in English words that we borrowed from French, like an ensemble, esprit de corps, that's your organization morale. How positive do people feel in your company that they're motivated and have high morale and high enthusiasm? Entente, ménage à trois, clique. These are all French terms that the Americans and the English have adopted. So yeah, so of course, and he makes this point that in Western social science, American social science, there's this assumption that somehow the more modern you are, the more developed, the more progressive you are, the more individualistic you should be. That if you become more developed, you become less and less concerned about the group and maintaining group obligations and focus more on your own individual wishes and needs. And it tends to portray communitarianism as a feature of more traditional. In other words, traditional means backward, underdeveloped, boo, boo, boo. And of course, he wants to attack that notion in this book. Yet, of course, in the last 50 years, since 1980, when I started college in 1980, there's been this big focus on the economic success, you know, of course, about the Asian tigers, tigers, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And then, of course, the big tiger, China. That's a big tiger. And doing quite well with their communitarian focus. And it should lead us both to doubt the success of individualism and its inevitability. Yeah, so again, to repeat the point I made earlier, as with universalism versus particularism, in other words, standard rules that we must follow, I will never testify that I will never lie in testimony to protect my friend who was driving the car that hit that drunk, stupid pedestrian. No, wrong. Versus particularism, I have to take care of my friends. So a more accurate statement is probably that individualism and communitarianism are complementary, not opposing preferences. So yeah, of course, any successful business in the United States has got to be concerned about esprit de corps, organizational morale. You have to think about the success of your organization. And he emphasizes that this reconciliation can occur through an integrative process that you as the manager must oversee. And keep in mind, you got to be very careful because it is so easy to insult your staff because I'm your boss. You are worried about me because I have so much of your life in my hands. And 80% of our social life is our job. So you got to be very careful because it's very difficult once you make major mistake to correct that mistake. It is the individuals addressing voluntarily the needs of the larger group. And particular instances teaching an actor to limit its universalism. Okay, so again, integrating these approaches. Individualist versus communitarian preferences seriously affect international management within various countries, and the impact is greatest in motivation, negotiations, and decision-making within an organization. He goes on here. Again, in Anglo-Saxon and American perspectives, for example, the assumption that individual wants the boss to recognize them, say, you are doing a great job. You see, that's the example of success. You should be more like him. And you go, yeah, man, yeah. Americans like that. But you can see how it can be kind of awkward and uncomfortable, right? If you're doing best, you should get paid for it. You should get more money. And this is true maybe in the United States in terms of people's assumptions, but it's not true in most of Europe, not to mention most of the world. There's this assumption in North European American culture that the contribution of any single individual in a common task is easily distinguishable. You can easily distinguish who has contributed successfully to a group project, how much they've contributed, who did the most work. And I even speaking about this is a challenge. I'm in political science, right? So I don't teach management, business administration, but I hear stories about how other professors often, maybe here as well, they will give you students group projects, right? Like your 4 students here in class today, we will have a group project and you're all going to get the same grade, A+, A, B+, B, C+, C. And I know, and you have skills and weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses, skills and deficiencies that are different from him. And you have skills and weaknesses, strengths and deficiencies that are different from him. And that you have skills and weaknesses and strengths and deficiencies that are different from him. And you all have to contribute together to work together, and you're all going to get one grade on the basis of this one common project output that you create. Now, you may have taken classes like that already, but Americans, speaking as an American, I don't like those kinds of projects when I was a student. I wanted to work on my own because I run into people that I think are not very smart. They're in the group and they don't do well. I don't think they're doing enough work. What kind of contribution do they make? Why should we be graded together? And I always had a problem with that. But in American universities, it's becoming more and more common because of this awareness that we only are successful within a group context. Like Barack Obama reminds young people today, Barack Hussein Obama, the former president of the United States, who was a community activist, a social activist, and after he was graduating from college and had a law degree, he said, nobody no one achieves great things alone. You, me, nobody achieves great things by themselves. And I always have to remind myself of that to teach my students. But even like in American colleges and American universities, there's more and more of this focus about we have to teach our students how to work successfully in groups. And you're going to have some people that are going to be they're going to look more impressive than others in a group. And that depends upon the project. It depends upon the specific situation. But we have to do this because people are only successful as parts of organizations. Another assumption, as we already highlighted, is that there's no serious problems emerge from singling out an individual for praise in America. Like, good job, you. See? It even makes me awkward even talking about it, but it's just so common in America. And none of these assumptions may be true in communitarian cultures. Yeah, so he mentions, again, most of our current knowledge on this subject, and this book is published in 2020. So, it's only 3 years old in terms of writing. He's saying even now, most of the current knowledge on this subject comes from theorists writing in English in the individualistic West. He highlights how the capital letter I in the English language is one that writers most frequently use. This term I, this is the most commonly used word in English, most frequently used word in English. I, me, I. And he says the idea that rising individualism is part of the emergence of civilization is arguably a cultural artifact belief. In other words, it's something that's it's a manifestation of American culture rather than a fact beyond dispute. In the West, the habitual assumptions of the relationship between society and individual have changed since the Renaissance. Before, even in Western Europe, before the 16th century, individuals were defined primarily in Europe, including in England, in terms of feudal group or guild or city-state or tribe or clan or family. And then individualism emerged during the Renaissance as a emerging ideology. And internet offers individual control as well as social networking communities. So the internet allows for individualism, but also it allows creating subgroups where you can identify and self-identify and work within those groups to gain your satisfaction of your emotional and status needs. And so again, he tries to explain what's going on, and he connects this to Protestantism, the rise of Martin Luther. In the West, he says significant evidence exists that the individualism communitarian divide adheres to the Protestant Catholic divide. That in Southern Europe, Italy, for example, and Spain, you find this stronger communitarian focus. But Calvinists and Protestants, remember I mentioned Max Weber's book, The Protestant Ethic and the Rise of Capitalism. Calvinism had emphasized that the individual had their own individual relationship with God. God can have a personal relationship with you, and you decide what that relationship will be. You have a choice. And you can make a contract with God as to what you will do to achieve salvation. And this notion of contracts, it's so important in business, in Anglo-Saxon business, right? That we have to write down what our agreement is, and we should follow the letter of our contract. And the contract is like the Bible. It's almost a sacred document. And that is what comes first, capitalism or Protestantism? Trump and ours knows about, obviously, Max Weber, right? it doesn't really matter which comes first, but Protestantism and modern business in Northern Europe, they have influenced each other so much. I mean, we talk about Jehovah's contract, covenant. Covenant is a fancy word for contract. Covenant is a contract. So Jehovah in the Bible, according to the King James Bible, reaches a covenant with the people of Israel. A contract. We already mentioned, I think, in the American politics class, I talked about it. Contract theory, that from John Locke and Thomas Hobbes as Anglo-Saxon great English philosophers of the 16th and 17th century, conceptualizing how you are the king or the ruler, and I am the subject. We reach a contract. I will obey you and your orders in return for you protecting my life, liberty, and my property. And if you fail to maintain your terms of the contract, of the covenant, then I have the right to overthrow you. And you cannot tell me, oh, God said you're the king and you have the right to do whatever you want. No, there's a contract for me to obey you. You have to fulfill your obligations. And this notion of contract has almost religious significance in Protestant societies. The Mayflower Compact was the compact by which the first English settlers reached among themselves to come to America and create the first colonies on the ship called the Mayflower, right? And you seek to justify your place in this world through your individual works. You approach God as an individual, as a separate being. Roman Catholics here at the Catholic University here at the CUK have always approached God as a community of the faithful. And he says research has shown that Catholics score higher on group choices, while Protestants tend to choose group-oriented approaches at a significantly lower level. And he says Catholic cultures, as well as Asian cultures on the Pacific Rim, score lower on individualism than do Protestant Western cultures. And those are the Northern European cultures I was already mentioning. US as populated by people from UK, United Kingdom, Scandinavia, Germany, and Canada. So just to go on here, there's another exercise coming up. Individualism and politics. Different factions have promoted or opposed individualism in different historical contexts. So again, context shapes our prevailing social philosophies and ideologies of our nations, of our respective nations. The strength of the individualism ethic in a country depends upon its political fortunes of its advocates. So if it works for you and your country, then it will become dominant. What does work for you mean? Typically, it means national self-determination, national freedom, national influence and power. In the US, American individualism based upon American context, creating a new country in a society far from Europe, in which people have to take care of themselves. It's not surprising that individualism would flourish in America, whereas the French Catholic tradition strongly opposed it. And there's a lot of historical reasons for that. When you look at France, France is a European country that has a big land border with Germany, and it has a big sea border. So France is going to spend a tremendous amount of resources on its military. It needs both a big army to defend itself from invasion, and it needs a big navy. And you're going to have a big military, you're going to have to tax people and control them in order for France to be successful in dealing with its adversaries and its challenges. So the French state is going to be big and strong. The British, they've never really had a big, strong army. a permanent, expensive, large army because they've got a sea border. The English Channel protects them. Ships and navies are much cheaper than armies. So again, there's less incentive in Britain to have a powerful central state controlling and organizing everybody to fight land and sea wars than the British, who they spend money on a navy and they have a natural border protecting them from army invasion. And so they don't have to focus so much on controlling and mobilizing land and sea-based enemies against land and sea-based adversaries. So yeah, France has a strong central government state tradition, even though they chopped off the head of the king. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, he's like a king. He's an elected king in France. And then, of course, the French Renaissance, Voltaire, Rousseau in the 18th century introduced the appeals of individualism to the French. French socialists advocated individualism to challenge traditional religious, intellectual, and economic hierarchies. And he says that the pro-business French Liberal Party was in power when France collapsed. This shock to France of losing World War II to Germany at the beginning stage, he seems to emphasize that that was really important shock to French business. French business has been strongly influenced by the need to maintain a powerful, effective French government, more so than a focus in French business than in English business culture. The British, again, Margaret Thatcher, she has been dead for 10 years now, but her impact on Britain today, making Britain, again, a great power in the world, so much so that it can decide to leave the European Union, again, emphasizes the British individualism as traditional value for solving Britain's problems. For solving France's problems, the state is more emphasized. Again, to go on here, okay, we have another exercise coming up. Does modernization imply individualism? And there's this principle of Gemeinschaft, there's a German term, versus Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft is a social context based upon family membership that does not emphasize individual differentiation. So a Gemeinschaft society is a communitarian society versus Gesellschaft, in which the society gives status and honor to people on the basis of their separate individual tasks and achievements. Adam Smith also emphasized division of labor as being individualizing, one of the great founders of modern economics. Max Weber, I already mentioned him, also emphasized the multiple content elements of individualism: dignity, autonomy, privacy. These are all notions of individualism and personal development opportunity. And there's this stereotype, you know, Steve Jobs. Oh, Steve Jobs is amazing. Elon Musk. Oh my God, Elon Musk. That's what you should be like. You should be like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, right? These amazing individuals. That's a product of Western, particularly American thinking, that you have individual geniuses create businesses like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and shape our futures and invent new products and deserve high salaries. I mean, Jeff Bezos, he's going to be worth $1 trillion, $1,000 billion in a few years, and he deserves it. That's the view, at least among traditional American belief. We admire historically also Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. And so how much should we give credit to individuals? In reality, we see today, Nobel Prizes in science are typically given to more than one person in an achievement. Giving a single Nobel Prize to one person, that's becoming more and more rare. There's always this understanding, like Barack Obama said, nobody achieves great things alone. In fact, a commonly heard claim is that the creative genius involves combining ideas. And again, that's a big focus in the book, that the ideas must come from a community of some sort, whether it be Silicon Valley in the United States, where Stanford is located, right? That you want to be in Silicon Valley because these people are feeding each other's minds. And that's where these great individuals emerge. Individuals in the public sphere are not self-made, but rather our parents, teachers, friends, and families played critical roles in creating us. I mean, my mentor, he emphasized about how incredibly important teachers are in shaping, in guiding individual, young, developing personalities and minds. Think about, I'm 59, right? I'm an old man and I'm single, don't have any kids. And I spend a lot of time just thinking. And I think about what this teacher did to me when I was 11 years old and guiding me, what this teacher did, what that bad thing that teacher did. They had such impacts on me. And these people are so important in shaping and creating us to go on and become great achievers. Okay, so here's another task. What kind of job is found more frequently in your organization? Again, he's asking these 140,000 managers. A, everybody works together and you do not get individual credit. Or B, everybody's allowed to work individually and individual credit can be received. And so let's go back to the exercise statements here and make sure you can see that. So we go back to share screen. And so what kind of job is found more frequently in your organization? A, make that a little bigger. Everybody works together and you do not get individual credit. Or B, everybody's allowed to work individually and individual credit can be received. So please vote. What seems more natural to you? What's more normal? I know you're young people, you're not yet, working professionally. What seems more normal to you? Okay, and so we have a total of 5 votes. Everybody, again, this B notion, everybody's allowed to work individually and individual credit. Okay, so that's a more typical Western American viewpoint. This would be something that would be more typical in Italy, for example. And oh no, we're up to 4. Okay, so this group is heavily individualistic. So let's go back to the notes. And so what do they cover? There you see my little face there when I was using the Photoshop photo function in the computer. Working individually. Again, Russia, number 1, well, 72%, not 95% like last time, but 72%. Again, and Romania, another former communist country. These are mid-level, highly ambitious, English-speaking, self-confident Romanian and Russian business managers. Everybody gets individual credit. United States, but just slightly behind them, UK, Australia, Finland, Norway. Who's at the bottom here? India again. Indonesia, Singapore, that's interesting. I mean, that's a really modern place. That's an Asian tiger, right? Portugal, Japan, Hong Kong. Oh, there's Cambodia. I see Cambodia. Yay, Cambodia. So he's got some Cambodian managers involved. Malaysia, Brazil. Where's South Korea? Here. South Korea, you know, it's not like this class. South Koreans are more community oriented, group oriented. China, Thailand. This is not a scientific sample. Again, these are mid-level English speaking managers who are taking a seminar with entrepreneurs. Presumably it's in English language too, right? So you can compare. So only 23% of Japanese believe that a job is a place in which one is allowed to work individually. All right. And then we already covered these groups. And then here's that reference, right? These results relate to the recent political organization in these countries. That's the vague reference he makes to, he thinks Russia, Romania are reacting against, there's Bulgaria, they're still reacting against communism. Which community? When analyzing whether individuals are either self-oriented or community-oriented, the researcher must be careful about generalizing about which community with which a particular culture identifies. So what's your community? Is it your family? Is it your company? Is it your nation? I mean, I get this sense that South Koreans are very nation-oriented. I mean, we all know about the IMF crisis and how South Korean people who had gold would actually give their money to their gold to the South Korean government to help South Korea overcome the IMF crisis in 1998. That's a community-oriented perspective, right? Again, we have to develop Korea and make Korea strong and prosperous so that we can win the Korean War, reunify Korea, and then beat the Japanese. This high variation in figure 5.2 evidently is due significantly with the numerous communities with which different cultures choose to self-identify. So I think it's a rephrasing of what he said in the third edition of the book. Now we're in the fourth edition. He's rephrasing this, that basically these Russian managers they're not self-identifying with their company. If their company treats them badly, they will say, leave. They will leave. Right? You do what is best for you. Because under communism, you were told you're supposed to do what's best for your collective. But at the same time, we all know how intensely nationalistic Romanians and Russians are as well. That they're very concerned about the status and prestige and success of Russia and Romania and even the United States in the world. Okay, so we have another exercise. A defect, a mistake. Somebody made a mistake is discovered in an installation. It was caused, so in this installation being built by a team, like you're a team, there's a mistake was made. Somebody made a mistake. A defect is found because somebody made a mistake. It was caused by negligence of one of the members of the team. Responsibility for this mistake can be carried in various ways. So who's responsible for this mistake? A, the person causing the defect by negligence is the one responsible. B, because he or she happens to work in a team, the responsibility for the mistake, for the defect, should be shared by the group. So which of these two ways of thinking of taking responsibility do you think is usually the case in your society, A or B? A is the individual responsible is identified and found to be responsible, or B, the team shares the responsibility for the defect, for the mistake. So let's go back to the questions here and did I miss this one? Oh, no, sorry. Here it is. Okay, so there you see, make sure I share the screen again. So please choose A or B. What do you think is more usually the case in your home country, A or B? And so it looks like people already voted. And well, I guess 4 people chose A, the American way of thinking, and 1 person chose B. And I don't know who B is because it's anonymous. So then let's go back to the notes. And what are the results here? Individual responsibility. So this is the likelihood of choosing A. Russia, A. Romania, A. Norway, A. Again, the same countries, individual responsibility, they chose A. But in India, again, look at Singapore. Cambodia, is that the same thing? It looks like the same one of a previous. No, it's different. It's different. Working individually and individual responsibility. Look at that, Singapore. I've never been there, but it's a very modern place, right? Portugal, Japan, Hong Kong, Cambodia, Brazil, South Korea here. Again, Russia, Romania, Norway, Finland, Australia, UK, US, Switzerland, Bulgaria. Okay, so I want to make sure I get some feedback from you on some exercises that I know how you vote, so I can give you participation credit. But let's then go look at another file. Maybe I'll come back to this one later. Go here. And sorry, I'm trying to find so and now we already covered this one. Trying to change companies in a globalizing environment is a challenge. We're talking about cultures of individuals, and then there's a big emphasis in the book on the relationship of organizations to individuals that are 4 standard images that Trompenaars and Hampton Turner want to emphasize, and that come together in those come together in organizations. And what's this one? Oh, I covered this one as well. What's this? No, I already covered this. Maybe I already covered these. I guess I don't have, I thought I had another exercise from a previous focus. Okay, here is an example of an organization, Samsung, being successful in adapting to the community orientation of other countries in other, yes. Screen share? Okay, thank you, thank you. So this emphasis on if you want to have long-term business success in different cultures, You have to accommodate those different cultures. So this article emphasizes how Samsung is emphasizing corporate or community social responsibility, CSR. Right? This notion that the company should demonstrate to the local population that has a strong focus upon, well, all cultures have a strong focus on community well-being, that it's necessary to be successful in these countries like Vietnam, that if you want to compete effectively with other companies, you have to look like you are concerned about the well-being and development of the important communities to which people strongly self-identify. Vietnamese people obviously are proud patriots. I mean, they defeated the British, they defeated the French and then the Americans in the Vietnam War. These people are as nationalistic as Korean people are. And if you want to be successful in those countries as a company, particularly in these poor countries, you have to look like you have a concern for the well-being of those people as a community. So Samsung, which is a world leader in so many economic activities, is spending money on social work, providing scholarships and to poor students, and environmental protection efforts. That these are all an effort to appeal to the strong community orientations that all peoples have. Particularly as you come in as a foreign company, as an international company into this community, you're going to be perceived as a foreign company, and they're going to be suspicious of you unless you make a special effort to demonstrate your concern, not just for the individual well-being of individual Vietnamese workers working for you who are ambitious and want to make money and improve their own life, but you have to make an effort to appeal to the broader community. And Samsung, for example, is evidently a leading actor in carrying out it's called corporate social responsibility or community social responsibility activities. Even so much, for example, that these companies will spend money and assign an individual as their corporate social responsibility officer. So these big companies will often have a CSR administrator in their national affiliate, their national subsidiary, whose job it is to work to develop good, positive public relations for that organization by appearing to show and demonstrate their concern for the well-being of the entire community, not just making money. Okay, what's this one? Oh, yeah, Trompenaars. This is a news report about how Frans Trompenaars was being brought in to speak at a consultant on these very high prestige, high profile events where he is one of the speakers. Again, he's a well-known person, and a keynote address from KPMG. I told you this organization bought his company. I'm sure Frans Trompenaars is getting a lot of good money making those keynote addresses to these organizations that are focused on cross-cultural management in high-tech and cutting-edge industries. Okay. Here's another reference to Trompenaars in military science literature, to the textbook, and the author of your textbook is referenced here in this study about how to manage military operations with multinational units and attachments that are involved in these exercises. So the military is interested in what Trompenaars is writing here. Those beliefs, values, and assumptions permeate the Army and operate at different cultural levels, such as those proposed by Frans Trompenaars and Hampton Turner. And again, so Trompenaars and Hampton Turner's thinking has impacted a lot of other social science work being done. Again, to show you how apparently a lot of people find what they have to say to be interesting and useful. I already covered this one, sorry. Yeah, this is a brief summary of the different cultural models that they emphasize, and that's not the one I wanted to emphasize. Just a second here. Share screen. Yeah, here it is. So you come up with 4 different models of ideal models of corporate culture. And the family model is the model that tends to dominate in Southern Europe, in Italy, in which the boss is not just the senior manager, the boss is like the family, the boss is like the father, the abuji of the organization, and the people that work in the organization view that individual as responsible for their well-being. And in return, the people that work for the boss are loyal, and that means that being maximally flexible in terms of evaluating people and their performance and making sure that everybody feels included, even if their particular official qualifications are not necessarily reflective of what is needed. That's more of a focus in the family culture of corporations. The incubator culture, that's the model that is really promoted in Silicon Valley, right? In the United States, where you have so many new companies coming out of these environments, startup culture. And that, of course, has its pluses and it has its disadvantages. If you want to make a global company with fulfilling its obligations to numerous different national communities with different cultures, maintaining your orientation as an incubator, as a startup, might be a problem. And then that's the emphasis in the book, how to try to evolve and change corporate culture. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. The point is made in this globalizing environment that mergers and acquisitions is a big focus of global international business today. And the point is made that 70% of mergers and acquisitions, can you see this, by the way? Yeah, 70% of mergers and acquisitions between different companies of different cultures fail. And they fail because of different corporate cultures. It's so difficult to change people's basic thinking about what it means to work for Samsung versus what it means to work for another company. An example would be, for example, even American and German companies. 30 years ago, when I was at the American University in Bulgaria in the late 1990s, so not quite, more like 25 years ago, Daimler-Benz, the big German company, decided to merge with Chrysler Corporation. Now, Chrysler was one of the big American car companies, and it was going bankrupt. Now, you would think Daimler-Benz, that's a German company. Chrysler is an American company. It's Northern Europe. They're all Northern European cultures. They merged, and it didn't work. They merged in 1998, I believe, and Daimler-Benz spent in 1998 $50 billion to buy Chrysler. Now, you might say, well, okay, so if Daimler-Benz purchased Chrysler for $50 billion US, then Daimler-Benz is going to be the organization that is fundamentally in charge. And it didn't succeed. the inability to communicate, to integrate those two companies, the resistance and the hostility of American stockholders, of American constituencies and stakeholders in Chrysler to German demands was so great that in less than 10 years, I think in 8 years, in the early, several years later, Daimler-Benz got rid of it. They got rid of their partnership with Chrysler, and then of course in 2008, Chrysler went bankrupt during the Great Recession, and then it went bankrupt, and then Fiat, the Italian company, came in and bought what was left of Chrysler. But Chrysler had to go bankrupt. It had to die as a company before another foreign company, Fiat, the Italian company, came in and took it over, and apparently did a decent job of integrating the Chrysler and Fiat operations under a Canadian-Italian charismatic leader whose name I can't remember. He died several years ago. And then French company Peugeot merged with Fiat Chrysler and merged the two, and now it's called Stellantis. So the French company Peugeot merged with Fiat Chrysler, and the company has now been renamed Stellantis, and it's only like 2 years old. And but that's a real high-profile case of mergers and acquisitions. Most of the time, they're much less successful than had been predicted, had been hoped when the decision was made. And he makes the point it's because of this great difficulty integrating these different cultures. The guided missile, this is more the American established organization. An organization is a mechanistic unit that you take parts and bits of the different parts of the organization and you put them together in order to achieve an objective, like a missile going towards an objective. And once you set the objective, you restructure the organization and the components within it in the different units to achieve the objective. And that means people and resources are treated like mechanistic commodities. And then the French model is the Eiffel Tower model, that organizations are like military units with clear hierarchies, emphasis on rank, labels. Again, that's the state-focused French model of doing business. They almost look like they're part of the French state. They're very militaristic, let's not say militaristic, but hierarchically, clearly hierarchically motivated. And you have to follow the rules and procedures. Whereas this is more individualistic. People have more voluntaristic, at least the managers do, more discretion in restructuring the organization to do whatever is necessary to achieve the objective. And these are the four metaphors that they highlight here. And of course, you want to try to integrate different elements of these cultures, but you need to know what predominates in Italy or Japan or France or Korea. He says, among nations who industrialized late compared to United States and Britain, many corporations with family type cultures may be found. He claims South Korea is more family type, right? The founder of Samsung, it's a famous family, right? You have that in the US as well. Same with in Spain, Singapore, Japan, Italy, and Greece. The Agnelli family, right? They dominated fiat since its founding. Many feudal traditions remain in societies in which the transition from feudalism to industrialism was rapid. And each of these different cultures has their advantage. I mean, they have been pretty successful in South Korea. These family-oriented chaebol, right, with the Lee family and the other families dominating, maybe not very fair, because they were associated with the dictatorship, at least in terms of their big development. But you can't necessarily say that a family type culture is less effective than a guided missile or an Eiffel Tower culture. The incubator model, that's more of a problem if you're going to have a large corporate organization. But at the same time, there's a lot of benefits for the startup model because of that emphasis on creativity and generating new products and new resources through innovation. Okay, so let me go back to the other notes and stop share, go back to screen share to these notes. Oh no, that's not the one. I think I already covered this one. So go screen share. And what did I do? Just a second. Make sure I open that up. That's not the right one. This one. Okay. Okay. So go on here to where we left off. Okay, so the French in their Eiffel Tower type cultures, they tend to experience individualism more negatively. Whereas German culture tends to be more optimistic and organic unity of individual and society. Again, reflects different traditions, historical developments. American history and resources help explain why the US is one of the strongest proponents of individualism. And again, some of you, if you take American politics and American history, you're going to encounter the works by Alexis de Tocqueville. He was a French aristocrat who was fascinated by American politics and society. He also wrote about the French Revolution. In the early 19th century, he went to the United States and wrote a book called Democracy in America. And this has been a really important book. 180 years later, his book, Democracy, well, 200 years later, Democracy in America is still referenced. And he described America as highly individualistic, having strong confidence, self-reliance, and self-effort. He emphasized, for example, how he comments in the book how, and you go to America and people, they all have strong opinions. Like in Europe, in France, if I'm a peasant and I'm not expected as a French peasant to have a strong opinion about various topics because I'm considered a peasant. But an American, he says that they're even if they're dumb and ignorant, they have these strong opinions about just about anything. So he emphasizes the strong confidence and self-reliance and self-effort. And during the Cold War, remember President Eisenhower, the president of the United States during the 1950s after Truman, fighting the Cold War against the Soviet Union and communism, declaring to the world, what does America stand for in Korea, in Southeast Asia, everywhere? His Commission of National Goals declaring that the central goal of American civilization is individual self-realization. That's why what we stand for. That's why we're fighting these wars against communism around the world. And this supposed superiority of American individualism has always been questioned. The Harvard sociologist Daniel Bell labeled consumerist type individualism as modernism. And he critiqued it as a weakening of the US industrial infrastructure. And I guess you could say you can even see that in the COVID-19 pandemic. The Americans have done pretty poorly compared to, not to mention South Korea, but compared to European countries in dealing with the pandemic, because Americans are more resistant to believing or accepting that they have an obligation to other people. It's obviously people can't exist outside of a society, outside of a community. But the Americans, this notion that you have to wear a mask because it's an obligation you have to each other. Americans just have more tendency to resist this. I wear a mask if I don't want to get sick. It's for me, it's my benefit, not for your benefit. I should wear a mask to take care of you? Like, so many Americans, they resist that. So America has done much less well in terms of vaccination rates and in infection rates than much of the rest of the developed world. I mean, it really illustrates the impact of culture. It's been fascinating to watch these processes unfold. With the development of the information society, communitarian societies more quickly distribute information among their members. And again, I think he sees that this is part of any explanation for the economic development miracles of East Asia. And of course, China being the most recent example of that. Emile Durkheim, he's one of the founders of French sociology. He called for the integration of communitarianism and individualism. And communitarianism takes both primitive and modern forms. I think that might be a misspell. Primitive form is mechanical stability, solidarity, which is a communitarian conscience. It pervades the community from which none of its members may dare deviate. The individual is dominated by the community. It is losing its position because industrialization requires a division of labor, which mechanical solidarity has difficulty accommodating. And partly for this reason, Protestant, I think that's Protestant. Protestant individualist nations had an early economic success versus sophisticated form, organic solidarity, voluntary integration among sovereign beings. And so this communitarian versus individualism, this has been something that's been highlighted and recognized for many decades. It's a new form of social integration becomes necessary as the extension of the division of labor causes the individual to share fewer characteristics with other individuals in the same societies. So we're all different but necessary. The analogy is to an evolving biological mechanism. And in the developing economy, companies appear to be more successful if they synthesize individualism and communitarianism in increasingly complex, differentiated, interdependent societies. So here you have a nice little diagram reconciling these individualism and communitarianism. Okay, so what I want to highlight, I think we want to go to another exercise here. Okay, so several managers were discussing whether close cooperation or fierce competition was the most salient mark of the successful enterprise. So here are 4 statements. Competition is a supreme value of any successful economy or company. Attempts by major parties to cooperate usually end in collusion against one or more of them. So you have to compete, and if you cooperate, collusion, which can be a crime, may occur. Competition is the supreme value of any successful economy or company, because this involves serving customers better than rivals, thereby assuring the public interest. 3, cooperation makes among stakeholders is a supreme value because this shared aim makes companies fiercely competitive towards outsiders, thereby fulfilling personal interests. 4, cooperation among stakeholders is a supreme value. Personal rivalry and competing for self-advancement are seriously disruptive of effective operations. So it says here, allocate 1 to the approach you prefer and 2 to your second choice. Then indicate similarly what you believe would be favored by your closest colleagues at work. So let me see how I set this up here. Okay, so let me make sure I'm sharing the screen. Okay, so I ask you to choose, I think up to 3 different choices, right? Allocate 1 to the approach you prefer and 2 to your second choice. Then indicate similarly what you believe would be favored by your colleagues at work. So choose 3, all of you choose at least 1 up to 3 from the 4. Choose 1, 2, or 3 of these 4 different options, okay? And let's see how this goes. I haven't tried to do this on Cyber Campus before. So let me see what happens here. So if there are 5 people in a class and each of you chooses 3 times, that will be 15 votes. If there are 6 people in a class and you each vote 3 times, that's 18 votes. So you can vote up to 3 times. You can vote up to 3 times. And I think that's it. So the class tends to emphasize more cooperation. That's interesting. I mean, the United States, I think this would do more strongly than this. Look at this. Look how much. I mean, I don't think if this was you're an American class that this would be the result. And again, it's anonymous, so I don't know how people are voting. And go back to the notes. Oh, wrong one. Close that. Okay. So of course we should cooperate and compete. And again, this yin-yang approach is what they're going to emphasize throughout the whole book. And so again, he wants to make the book useful for business managers. So in individualistic societies, there's this greater focus upon this I form, use of I. Decisions are made on the spot by representatives. People ideally achieve alone and assume responsibility. People go on vacation, are taken in pairs. You know, when I came here to Catholic University Korea, we used to take a university vacation. There would be a university retreat that we would take in early February, and we'd go to like some resort in the mountains. They even went to the Philippines once, but they're not doing that anymore here. That was years ago. In communitarian societies, there's more frequent use of the term of the form we. Decisions are referred back by the delegate to the organization. People ideally achieve in groups. Vacations are taken in organized groups or even with extended family. And tips for doing reconciliation. It used to be tips for doing business, but they want to emphasize that reconciliation of individualism, communitarianism, universalism, and particularism, that reconciling successfully these endpoints, different endpoints, that's what business involves in creating value for the business, for the organization. So for communitarians, like Koreans, I guess, doing business with Americans, prepare for Beware that prepare for quick decisions and sudden efforts not referred to headquarters. Americans will make decisions on the spot, supposedly. The negotiator will delegate responsibility to the negotiator. The boss will delegate responsibility to the negotiator to make decisions. That this is supposedly kind of shocking to Confucian societies. The toughest negotiations were probably already done with the organization, within the organization, while preparing for the meeting. You have a tough job selling them the solution to this meeting. So in other words, when the people arrive, they've already made their decision what they want. Conducting business alone means that this person is respected by his or her company and has its esteem. That is the representative. And the aim is to make a quick deal. For individuals doing business with communitarianisms, show patience for time taken to consent and to consult. You've got to build relationships. That's the emphasis here. You've got to devote the time to building relationships. A negotiator can make a decision, but may have to withdraw it upon consulting with a superior. The toughest negotiations are with the communitarians you face. You must somehow persuade them to cede to your points at the multiple interests in your company's demand. If somebody comes into negotiations from a communitarian culture surrounded by a lot of advisors, that means that person has high status. And the aim is to build lasting relationships. So that's advice to Americans doing business with Koreans or Cambodians or Koreans or Chinese. And then he gives you some advice for differences in managing and being managed. And then we can jump ahead here. We have another test. So the question is, would you express your feelings openly if they were upset by something at work? If you were upset by something at work, would you express your feelings? If you're at work and something has happened that's made you very angry or very upset, would you express that to people at work there? And so we can go to the exercise. I'm looking for my 4, 5. I guess that's it. You're in a meeting, you feel insulted because your business partner tells you that your proposal is insane. You come up with a proposal and your partner says, you're crazy. What is your response? 1, indicate 1 with the approach you prefer, and 2, your second choice. Similarly, indicate with 1, the approach you believe would be favored by your closest colleagues at work, and 2, the approach you believe that would be their second choice. So you can vote up to 4 times. So if there's 6 people voting, there can be up to 24 votes. If there are 5 people voting, there'll be up to 20 votes. 1, I will not show that this person has hurt or insulted me because that would be seen as a sign of weakness. It would make me more vulnerable in the future. 2, I will not show that I am hurt because that would spoil our relationship. This restraint will allow me later to tell the counterpart how much I was hurt by the comment so that he or she might learn from it. I would rather show my emotions when the counterpart has more chance to improve our business relationship. 3, I will show clearly that I am insulted so that my counterpart gets the message. I believe the clarity of my message will allow me to be able to control an even greater emotional upset in the future. Or 4, I will show clearly that I am insulted so that my counterpart gets the message. If business partners cannot behave themselves properly, they have to bear the consequences. So you can vote up to 4 times. So please vote. So interesting, a lot of you choose 3 and 4, like you will show your emotions. I have to say, I tend not to. Okay, back to the notes. So who will restrain their emotions? Finland will restrain their emotions. These countries tend to restrain their emotions. These people less so. Italians, Russians, they will truly, if they're upset, they'll let you know. And I have to say, when I encounter this, because I was raised by my mom. My mom was Northern European. When people express their emotions at work, I get really nervous. I mean, I think that, oh my God, this is a catastrophe. But these people don't think it's, I mean, if you're an Italian and you're upset, you're expected to show your emotions. And your business partner is not expected to be intimidated or scared or intensely worried. That's normal. It's okay. That's what human beings do, at least in Italy. Like me, I got this Italian last name, but I'm not really Italian. Not in my culture. And so they give you some explanation of what may be going on here. Italians are emotional because they identify with their sales team. He's talking about, again, this trying to award, paper performance, individualism. Anglo-Saxons and Northwest Europeans think emotion has no immediate relevance. The incentive system either works or it does not. Neutrality is a means to an end. Emotions come later once the project incentives work or if they fail. But during the process of negotiating, you have to be cold and calculating. Control of emotions is assumed to be a sign of being civilized. Somebody who's civilized controls their emotions. Italians are emotional because they identify with emotions as part of social relationships. That you work because you love your work and you should express your love for your work. You can even get to the extreme of like getting violent. So that's this degrees of affectivity, of showing your emotion and culture. This is supposedly very important. And verbal communication, that's another interesting focus here. This is how Anglo-Saxons will be Latin, like Spanish and Italians, they will interrupt each other. So somebody's speaking and this person will start speaking and this person is still speaking. And that's considered not rude. In Asia, you're not supposed to interrupt people. Only if it's one person speaks, then you speak, then I speak, then you speak, then I speak. Anglo-Saxon in the middle. I guess he says that for Italians, this is considered to be a good thing, that if you say something that's really inspiring, I respond immediately, even when you're not done making your point, like, because I'm so impressed by what you've said. I want to show you how emotionally inspiring you are. Tone of voice, Asians tend to maintain more of a straight tone. Latins, blah, 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 blah. Anglo-Saxons in between. Nonverbal communication and contact and so on. Okay, well, that's where I guess we'll stop today. And yeah, we already covered this. And thank you very much for your help again, for helping me figure out what's going on here. It's always an adventure. So thank you very much. And I think we recorded this and I will post the recording on the website. So thank you.